Hello and welcome to this round 12 here at Grand Prix Copenhagen. Kim Stroh and Carl Christian Engstad are in our feature match area. 10-1 with Bern. We've seen it doing all sorts of good work all weekend long. Possibly helped out by the fact it's got a good matchup against the likes of Death Shadow. Kim Stroh on the other side of things, he kicks things off with, well, it looks like we've got a slightly different deck on our hands here. Codex Shredder, the first play from Kim Stroh. We've got it listed as Affinity. I'm not sure that that's the case. I think that we may have a little bit of Lantern control here.
This is a Lantern deck, of course. Also explaining the draw. Kim is undefeated. No losses with Lantern. And the Burn matchup, not the easiest, actually.
Yeah, it's a fiddly one because the Burn deck is one of the decks that has lots and lots and lots of relevant cards that don't care about Ensnaring Bridge. Inquisition of Kozilek here from Stroh. 2 Skullcracks, 2 Boros Charms, 2 lands. Redundancy.
Oh, still, I think you're, well, on the one hand, you're happy to be able to effectively prevent 4 damage with your discard spell. On the other hand, you have to be a bit concerned. This is, I don't want to say a perfect hand because it's a little bit slow, but it's a scary hand for you as the Lantern player.
Yeah, I mean, as much as Burn decks don't need to draw too many lands, having 3 is kind of ideal, and then those Burn spells, even if he takes the biggest Burn there in Boros Charm, that's 10 damage sat in Carl Christian Engstad's hand before you worry about any of the prowess that it's going to give that Monastery Swift Spear.
If Kim has Surgical Extraction, he might actually get some extra value here. Interesting is, oh, there you see the Surgical. So he can play the Surgical for black, not having to pay life for it.
Wait until after Carl Christian Engstad has drawn his card, so he has the option to potentially hit another Burn spell here. Now, why would you go for Skullcrack rather than Boros Charm here?
Well, I assume he has some life gain effect in the main deck. There's also, well, in some draws you can keep your opponent off white mana, but this is very unlikely against the Boros builds.
Especially with Inspiring Vantage as the first land of the game.
It's still, you know, it depends what you are aiming to do. Do you want to just gain some life with Inventor Sphere, for example? But I'm not so sure.
Well, maybe we'll see over the course of this game. I mean, the way that things go, I would say, is that if the game goes long, Kim Stroh is probably in okay shape. If it does not, though, well, the Burn deck is probably winning any quick games.
Yeah, actually Kim is holding the collective brutality that will gain him life. It's just, you know, leaving your opponent with the 4 damage spell, and then that might prevent your two points of life gain. That's not actually all that great, I would say.
So Boros Charm number 1 active, a swing for 2 with that Monastery Swift Spear. And Sacred Foundry getting hit by Codex Shredder. Not ideal.
But there was an ideal draw, another brutality. So now Kim, with this main deck, with these main deck cards, he actually has the tools to fight Burn.
So a big escalate there gets to drain Carl Christian Engstad for 2, kill Monastery Swift Spear, and take a Boros Charm out of Carl Christian Engstad's hand. Ideal pickup there.
And Carl is now flooding a little bit.
We knew about that Lava Spike, nothing to do about that. Kim Stroh taking the 3. Rift Bolt off the top. And a Mox Opal that's not currently active, but there are plenty of artifacts in Kim Stroh's Lantern control deck, so he will get a chance to find them soon enough.
Yeah, and Kim is waiting on that second brutality. Doesn't see a good reason to play it here. Of course, he would want to get another 2 toughness creature from Carl's hand. It's interesting whether you should actually play the Mox Opal. There's, of course, one reason for it is the fact that you don't want to cast it when Eidolon of the Great Revel is in play. But because he's holding collective brutality, that's not that much of a concern, I would say.
Well, as long as 3-point burn spells are coming off the top, Carl Christian Engstad still has plenty of hope here in this game. It's a strange matchup against Lantern Control for a lot of decks, knowing at what point you say this is not good enough.
Okay, super interesting cards we see there. Of course, you have to take Lantern to start assembling something of a lock. More interesting was the fact that we saw actually white leyline in the main deck.
Interesting, yeah. So, okay, we now have Lantern of Insight in play. We have a Codex Shredder, which means that Kim Straw has the option of milling his opponent rather than letting him draw specific cards. What are the key cards that Kim Straw is going to be hoping to deny Carl Christian Engstad here? Can he actually realistically just say any burn spell is bad enough?
I think you see, for example, there he... Okay, this is interesting. Did he not exile the Skullcracks? Maybe he chose not to exile them when he... Okay, anyway, that's another topic, but I think what he wants to do here is to just deny his opponent any creatures, because on 16 life he actually has some leeway. He can allow, for example, the Lava Spike. He's not going to do it because he has two ways of putting cards into the graveyard, but as long as you don't give Carl any creatures, I don't think you are risking too much. Carl will effectively just flood out now with that many... how do we call these effects? Milling effects?
Let's go with that. Admittedly, Pyxis of Pandemonium works a little differently to Gulkl's Bell, works a little differently to Codex Shredder, but one way they're all about denying opponents the draws that they really want. Fetch lands are kind of an important piece of the puzzle for Engstad here, because while he's got a fetch land on the board, he might be able to use that to at least give himself a hope of drawing something relevant rather than something irrelevant that he can see is coming. 15 is a lot of damage still to deal, though.
I think actually that Carl has no chance of winning this game, but there might be... Well, it might not be beneficial to concede just yet. You will get more information, you will get more knowledge about the cards in your opponent's deck. You also see, for example, maybe that there are the white ley lines. I mean, you have to expect them anyway, but at least you will get to see them.
So there's Ensnaring Bridge on top. That would mean that suddenly Kim Stroh might change his priorities in terms of what he allows and what he doesn't in terms of cards on top of Carl Christian Engstad's deck.
Yes, but now you can think about letting Carl also have Goblin Guides. But like I said, when you have three milling effects available, you don't have to be too critical. You can just basically do whatever you want. The main concern for Kim is actually to save time, which is, for me, an interesting question. Did he maybe not search his opponent's library with a Surgical Extraction just to not waste the time doing that?
It's interesting. I mean, I think it's something that I kind of like if you're the Lantern control player, very early on, trying to avoid doing things that are going to cost you time you might need later. This is the game that he's actually in pretty good shape with. He's still got a spare Collective Brutality in hand. He kind of just wants to get through this game good and quick to make sure that if he ends up with a challenging game later on, he's not going to lose out simply due to time.
Yeah, and now Kim is actually denying these 3-point burn spells. He's on 6, so the life totals have been somewhat updated. But here you see an interesting example. He does have to allow Carl to draw this Lightning Helix, because what he absolutely needs to prevent is, for example, a red Eidolon. So there are always some cards that he just cannot let resolve, and I would think that red Eidolon is probably the scariest card still. So how you play this Lantern deck with full knowledge of the opponent's top of the deck is you take away cards until there is a non-scary card for the opponent, and then you still allow something from time to time when your milling resources have been depleted.
Now, one card that I'm going to be intrigued to see whether or not it is part of Carl Christian Engstad's 75 is Harsh Mentor. Another card that potentially could be pretty good against this matchup, especially lots and lots and lots of activated abilities, and Harsh Mentor does make all of them cost 2 damage.
Yeah, Harsh Mentor actually is more scary than the red Eidolon, I would say.
Yeah, and it's one of those cards that I don't think there's too many matchups where it's really great for Burn to have it, but this would qualify.
The problem I see with the Harsh Mentor is also that it's just too susceptible to Collective Brutality. And a nice little touch is that Kim allows Carl to draw those Searing Blazes.
Yes, Searing Blaze without a target, not going to do too much. That going to be one of the early cuts for sideboarding, I would imagine.
Okay, and now Kim actually has also some life gain going, so he will be gaining 1 a turn, and now with Ensnaring Bridge in play and no cards in his deck in his hand, also he can let Carl draw all these Goblin Guides and Monastery Swift Spears.
Yeah, I think Inventor's Fair to me is the point where if I was the burn player, I'd be thinking about scooping things up. Gaining 1 life a turn while denying you burn spells a lot of the time is going to be enough that fairly shortly this is going to be a tough one for Kim to come back from, for Carl Christian to come back from.
You can argue as in Carl's seed that if you're winning games, you will win them very quickly. So for you, the time on the clock is not all that relevant. I personally would concede here because this game is just completely over, and Kim has demonstrated not only by his record but also in this game that he knows exactly what he's doing with the Lantern control deck.
So 2 Goblin Guides in play, not too much of a worry given that Ensnaring Bridge is going on. Google's Bell milling both players. Now there's Academy Ruins on top here. That one ends up being kind of interesting in terms of if you have the likes of Engineered Explosives in some matchups. It means that if Kim has milled some of his milling artifacts, then he can choose to keep finding them. Yeah, no Eidolon for you.
It's actually funny. The way this game is going, Kim doesn't really need another spell to win the game, but of course it's still safer to get rid of the Eidolon because he needs to empty his hand. So even if he doesn't need the spells to win, he needs his hand to be basically on 0 cards.
Now, if you're Carl Christian Engstad here, are you hoping to just have a little chunk of your deck that's sort of 7 burn spells in a row or something, so you can actually get something relevant in your draw step?
Well, what you have to hope for is that the Lantern player overextends his milling ability, and then you want to gather, let's say, 1 or 2 fetch lands in play, which allow you to manipulate the draws that you have. But this is something which you have to hope for in the mid game at the latest. If once the lock is assembled, there's just no library configuration that will get you out of it.
And as it is, the card that finally elicits the scoop from Carl Christian Engstad, a main deck Leyline of Sanctity, giving Kim Straw hexproof. Once there's no opportunity to point burn spells at the head and Ensnaring Bridge, no hope whatsoever. So that's game 1. We'll be back with game 2 and plenty more magic here from Copenhagen soon enough. But first, these messages. Hello and welcome back to this round 12 here at Grand Prix Copenhagen. The format is modern and Kim Stroh with his Lantern Control deck, still unbeaten in this tournament, has picked up his first game against Carl Christian Engstad. We're going to get a chance to jump across and see Martin User's match. He's at X&1 up against Mikko Karttunen, also 10-1. Grixis Death Shadow on one side of things, playing the Thoughtseize on Martin User's Elves, taking a Lanoir Elves there.
And Martin is just crushing it with his Elf stack. I think I saw on Twitter that he credited Andrew Backstrom for the list. At least that's what it looked like to me. And I think it's just really well positioned because Elves was a good deck anyway. But now he found a way to include the combo without diluting much of his game plan.
The combo, of course, being Vizier of Remedies alongside Devoted Druid. Devoted Druid, pretty potent in Elves anyway, but when you throw in at least the possibility of generating infinite mana, lots of untaps and all sorts of other good stuff, as early as turn 3, this deck just becomes even more of a monster. Yeah,
and what I like most about it is you get away with playing a single Vizier of Remedies. So, because actually what you want to do is to find it with Court of Calling.
Death Shadow coming down early for Mikko Karttunen, already at 12 life, meaning that Death Shadow is a 1-1.
And Mikko had to evaluate whether to kill the Lano Elves, knowing that Martin didn't have a second land up to that point, or whether to deploy the 1-1 Death Shadow. To be fair, 1-1 Death Shadow is not enough to win this matchup. You need it to grow, but as we've seen, a 1-1 Death Shadow can easily be a 5-5 or 6-6 the turn after.
Now, talking to Martin about this Elves deck, he said that one of the things that he liked about it compared to other decks that are using Vizier of Remedies is that the straightforward beatdown plan for this deck is very potent indeed.
I actually don't like to play this matchup as the Death Shadow player. It's really hard to get through if the Elves deck doesn't want you to to kill them, if you don't have Team or Battle Rage. And the problem is this Elf deck can kill you in one lethal swing. It doesn't have to bring you down to 5 first. It can just sit there and build up a critical mass of creatures, and then there's one overrun turn where you just completely, you basically go to -20. And there's not a lot that the Grixis Death Shadow deck or any Death Shadow deck can do about it. Mikko is somehow trying to do it by not casting his Fatal Pushes, so he had two different ways of operating this game. He could have cast the Fatal Push on the Archdruid, or maybe not. Maybe he didn't have a way to trigger Revolt. But for example, he also opted to not kill the Lanoir Elves as soon as he could. So he's not really trying to stop Martin from doing what he wants to do. He's trying to enact his own game plan. I just don't see how the Death Shadows are growing to a scary proportion.
With the Zuri Renegade leader in play here for Martin, and a Heritage Druid, if Mikko attacked here, Martin can simply block with 2 of his elves, tap all of his elves for mana, give them regeneration. There's no damage getting through there. And then on the swing back, we know that he's already got enough mana that he can use a Zuri Renegade leader for an overrun here.
Yeah, it's very likely that Mikko is now looking at a hand of, let's say, Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt, and Anger of the Gods. And he already knows that he's dead on board. Like, there's just no way of beating that board of elves.
We'll give this another turn or so. We have heard that our other match is kicking things off, but I kind of want to just see whether or not Martin User can close this one out. Mikko Karttunen deep in the tank here about what he's meant to do. A Death Shadow coming in here. What does this signal?
Desperation. I honestly think that Mikko is just drawing that. Martin doesn't even have to play it like super aggressively. He can always just wait it out. And Mikko is just now like basically suiciding his creatures into there just to just to enable the fatal push.
Now, fatal push, there's one elf on the board that can't be given a regeneration shield, and that is Azuri Renegade Leader.
Yeah, well done by Miko. He found a way to enable revolt, which Martin didn't have to allow. He didn't have to block. Not sure what the confusion is about. Maybe we should go to the other match if there's now
if
judge call involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're cleaning up a judge call on this one. So rather than us sitting and watching various gesticulating, let's get back and see how the Lantern control deck is doing.
Especially because the early turns are super important in this kind of matchup. I don't see a white ley line.
There is already a Lantern of Insight in play. Nothing to be able to help with getting cards off the top of either player's deck.
Okay, and the reason this looks like a fair game is the fact that there is a collective brutality in the graveyard. So that collective brutality most likely took care of the Swift Spear and maybe one of the burn spells in Car's hand. With one card in hand, Kim will draw the Ensnaring Bridge. So Carl knows that the chances of attacking with his ground creatures are getting really slim.
And Welding Jar means that keeping that Ensnaring Bridge around will be a little bit easier.
No play.
There's an Abrupt Decay in hand for Kim Stroh here, so maybe he's more concerned with using that. Destructive Revelry. Kim has the option of using Welding Jar to save it, give regeneration to the artifact, but it looks like he's happy to let the Lantern go, knowing that there's going to be something more important.
Interestingly, this turns off the Mox Opal. So now Kim will have to take damage from Spire of Industries.
So Monastery Swiftpear is getting to get stuck in here. Abrupt Decay says no to that.
Kim clearly valuing the Ensnaring Bridge higher than Lantern of Insights, even though he needs a Lantern, or his long-term plan definitely involves a Lantern.
So empty-handed magic for Kim Stroh at this point with an Ensnaring Bridge in play.
Kim drew a Ghost Quarter. I would have at least thought about just Ghost Quartering away the Stomping Ground. Okay, there's another fetch land, but Carl was currently not able to generate green mana if you Ghost Quarter him there.
So there is Academy Ruins getting back the Lantern of Insight. That part of the reason he wasn't too worried about losing it. Another Welding Jar on top.
Okay, now this is a really nice position. What Kim doesn't yet have is a way to mill his opponent.
Yeah, he's just fortunate at this point. It seems like Carl Christian Engstad largely drawing creatures, and creatures already pretty much dealt with thanks to that Ensnaring Bridge.
Exactly, and now Kim just needs to find a way to, prevent Carl from burning him out, which means he needs to draw at least one library manipulation card before Carl can land, let's say, Eidolons, Harsh Mentors, or draw burn spells to threaten to bring Kim down from 13. But even if there is an Inventor's Fair, Kim would probably pull ahead quite quickly. And with the board he currently has, I believe he will be able to cast anything on top of his deck. So he will stay on 0 cards.
So the fetch land got cracked there so that Carl Christian Engstad could have a better chance of drawing something relevant. He only had a Monastery Swift Spear on top. That changed into a Boros Charm, and now Eidolon of the Great Revel on top. We got a game on our hands.
Yeah, and we actually see an interesting line here. You don't have if you don't have a mill effect, maybe sometimes you have to shuffle your opponent's library in other ways.
Yeah, Ghost Quarter, meaning that when you destroy that stomping ground, then have to search your deck for a land.
Regarding buying time, I actually think that maybe Sacred Foundry would have been the better target here. Generally, it's Stomping Ground because it allows for Destructive Revelry, but you have 2 Welding Jars on the battlefield. You're more concerned about Karl just drawing a string of Boros Charms at that stage. Did he not find a mountain?
Interesting. It is a May, but it doesn't seem like a May that you would choose to ignore. Boros Charm here coming along in response to that Interposition. Skullcrack was there along with Goblin Guide, and Skullcrack obviously the take. Might just need to get our life totals all in order there. Seemed like Kim Stroh's there we go.
There is a Pixis. So that is basically...
The door is closing. It's not yet shut, but it is closing on this game. And just a full retail Rift Bolt there.
Oh, this is the death knell. Because now, if Kim is careful enough, he will not only prevent Kim from burning him out, but he will also be able to find whatever he needs to find to survive here. He now has a leyline on top, so that's, I think...
It's going to make life very difficult for Karl Christian Engstad. I would imagine that after sideboarding, Karl may have answers to enchantments, but I can't think that he would have very many, and Kim is in a position to deny him them.
This is the main point. If Kim is happy with what he sees on Karl's library, he actually will draw the Codex Shredder next, so that means Codex Shredder and Pixis gives him 2 milling effects, which is up to 4 if you consider how the turn cycle works between draws, and plus the leyline, plus the Ensnaring Bridge. How many cards in Karl's deck are actually relevant?
Burn spells aren't relevant until the leyline's out of the way. Creatures aren't relevant until Ensnaring Bridge is out of the way, with the possible exception of Eidolon the Great Revel or Hush and Mentor.
Okay, so it's going to be 8, maybe 10 cards that can be relevant maximum.
And they all basically need to be in a big clump if Karl is going to draw even one of them.
Exactly, and that's just not going to happen. Now Kim is playing this very carefully, which is understandable. He's winning. There's no need to rush it. And with every card that he adds, every milling effect that he adds to his board, and this is basically all he's drawing, he's making it that much less likely for Karl to win. Now what Karl is trying to do is to string together those fetch land draws and to somehow force Kim to mill, and then during the draw step you fetch and try to empty your opponent's milling resources that way.
And then after all of that, you need to get lucky and actually draw a card that's relevant.
It's a very long shot. Karl is on a good way here, but like we said, it's not. You can see that Kim is already milling cards, which are not really all that threatening. So yeah. If the card says target player, you just ignore it at that stage. And if it says Destructive Revelry, then you get rid of it.
Yeah, Destructive Revelry both does not target a player and would be a way of getting rid of Ensnaring Bridge. So
no, actually of the leyline. That's more it's more critical.
Yeah, I guess also the Ensnaring Bridge could be Welding Jarred, whereas the leyline can't.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Exactly. Oh, there's something beautiful about Lantern winning. It's I think it's good that we don't see it all the time. But some, a handful of dedicated players that bring this kind of deck to a GP and say, I can win my matches and I can win them in time. I think that's
it has an elegance to it.
Deserves respect.
I am happy that it represents a very small slice of the metagame, because I don't know about you guys in chat, but I don't know how great I'd feel about covering more than 2 or 3 matches with Lantern Control per tournament, because they do follow a very linear fashion. Like, I mean, there are various decks that sort of roll with the punches a little bit. This one pretty much is always looking to execute in the same way. The only difference is which cards it wants to mill.
It's a prison deck in an age where we don't see any more prison decks.
So Girapur Ether Grid here means that Kim Stroh might be able to end this game a little bit more quickly if he decides to start tapping his artifacts to shoot Carl Christian Engstad. I kind of like Girapur Ether Grid for its ability to close out games that otherwise might take a bit too long if the clock is concerned. There's a shade under 20 minutes here, so I think that one way or another Kim Stroh will be able to end this one, but occasionally you get players who, even in game 1, are very reticent about conceding. Winning those games can take a long time, and that means that winning 2 games can be a rough one.
Yes, but I think with Kim's record, he is not blazingly fast, but he's fast enough to play Lantern, and that's all that matters. Now, Carl is actually fetched away his land there at end of turn. Okay, now drawing another fetch land. Like we said, it's so unlike. I think it's like almost 0% that you even have enough relevant cards for Kim to.
I mean, I think that there's been at least 3 destructive revelries dealt with thus far.
And of course, if you count the artifacts here, 4, 8, 10, that's 5 damage on the battlefield for Kim. So he's super close to just having lethal.
Spellskite there, another way of rendering the removal spells of Carl Christian Engstad moot. And that enough for the handshake. Kim Stroh, going into round 13, remains undefeated. He's now 11 with a draw. Not a perfect record, but close enough that for the purposes of making top 8, it's not going to make too many odds there.
No, great stuff. This is round 12, so 3 more rounds, and we might very well see Kim make the top 8.
Fantastic stuff. We are going to be able to have a little bit more magic for you soon enough, but first, these messages.